Hello, everyone. You're listening to the Big Chill podcast. Welcome to our Euro 2020 preview, specifically looking at Group C. Before you get started, please subscribe to all of our channels on Spotify, Apple, whichever one you use to listen to our podcast. You're on YouTube now, so you're listening. What?
I've never heard you speak so slowly. For context, for anyone who's watching this who's not familiar with our videos, this is the first time Sam has ever done an intro to a video or to a podcast, and the level of focus that you were just paying to every syllable coming out of your mouth. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Big Chill podcast.
I don't think it was that slow. I just thought it was measured.
I'm not going to lie. For those who are watching this video are going to wonder why I couldn't look at the screen for the first 20 seconds. And that was because as soon as I looked at Eddie, I knew I would lose it.
Well, welcome to Group
But
C.
Yes, Sam is not incorrect. Definitely subscribe to all our different channels, especially Twitter, Instagram. Follow us on anywhere you get your podcast for sure. And obviously YouTube, if you're watching this now, hopefully you're already subscribed so you can get all our updates for this and all our other future videos.
Yeah. And I guess, look, you took a very cautious, conservative approach to your intro there. And I'm going to reverse Group C, and I'm going to imagine that a similar approach will be taken by North Macedonia as they play in a major tournament for the first time ever. Difficult one to, I have to admit, I've not watched many of their matches, so it's a little bit difficult for me to provide too in-depth of an analysis, but they did impress during the qualifications and during the World Cup qualifiers where they've also been in good form, so it's not really a fluke. They have shown themselves over the past 18 months to 2 years to be a team capable of competing at a European level. Obviously not been a country for that long. I think only gained independence in 1991, so relatively new by European standards at least. Not a lot of familiar names to English-speaking sort of Americans or Brits out there. There's only one Premier League player there in Alioski, who plays for Leeds. You also have... You're just going to wheel in and out of frame.
What's going on?
Wow, this Group C... The messiest group, it has to be said. Maybe this is a sign of things to come in the actual play. The familiar name in some ways, you've got Pandev up front, who will be, from kind of an experienced head there. And if they're going to do well, then you would imagine that they'll have to find goals from somewhere. So you would think a bit of pressure on Pandev, bit of pressure on Elmas, who impressed for Napoli this season. I don't give them much of a chance of qualifying, but it will definitely be... I think it's nice in a tournament to have a kind of new name who you get to see how they do. Anyone...
Completely brand new, right? Because they were former Yugoslav Republic.
Yeah.
It's just a quick question on that one. So we talked about having your hardest game at the start, but if you're an underdog in the group, is it better to have your easiest games at the start? Because then at least you may snatch a point, have momentum. Say if you then win your second game, you're at 4, and you may have a very real chance. Do you think it switches with a lesser club or a lesser nation?
I think it's one of those things, right? You can spin that whichever way you want, depending on how that opening game goes. So you can lose the easy gun first, and then everyone goes, well, your tournament's over. I bet you they wish they'd been able to play the sort of pressureless match against the Netherlands, say, in this situation. But I don't know. It's one of those, you're going to reverse engineer whatever the outcome is and say, yes, that's the path I would have wanted. In the same way that Russia kicked off the World Cup in 2018, right, with the easiest possible match, got off to a flyer, never looked back, and then everyone said, well, look, wasn't it great for them to have an easy opening match? Not to compare Russia in 2018 to North Macedonia in 2021, but I think it's one of those things, who knows? Now, they obviously kick things off against Austria, who you're saying is an easy match, but Austria are, consistently making it to major tournaments. They've actually never won a match at a European Championship, which is quite astounding given the number of times they've made it there. Basically consistently undone by their inability to score goals. And I think this will be no different. Anyone who watched them play England the other day, they're organized, they put in a lot of effort. They're, clearly know what they're doing, and there are good players within that. David Alaba is the standout player, really by any, compared with other players there. But you do have the likes of Arnautovic, who's, really thriving at Shanghai Port at the moment. But they're players, playing in Leipzig. I think, if I got this down correctly, that Austria are the team with the most players playing in the Bundesliga in the European Championship, which is very strange to have that it's not Germany, if you think about it. It's kind of
that is strange.
But no, they're the best they've ever done is make it to the group stages in 2008 and 2016. Difficult to see where they're going to get goals from, and that's just going to be their undoing. I don't know if anyone disagrees with me and thinks that they'll be able to sprinkle a few goals in there with the defensive.
No, they've always come across as that. They're just competent. They're just a competent team. They've got some structure, they've got some good players, but it just never happens kind of past or when it's needed to be. So no, I agree with you. They're just a weird club or a weird nation, because whenever you play them, you feel like it's a difficult game, or it will be or should be a difficult game. But in reality, whenever you watch it, it's not really. It's just a case of taking the time to break them down, and eventually you will. They come across as a strange one for me, Austria.
Yeah. And we can turn our attentions to the two teams I think most people will expect to qualify from the group, and that is Ukraine and the Netherlands, who kick the group off. They're the opening match of the group. Interesting one, because it's kind of two teams managed by iconic players from the 1990s, early 2000s. Because you have Andrei Shevchenko as the manager of Ukraine, you have Frank de Boer as the manager of the Netherlands. So for people roughly around our age, but certainly even skewing slightly older than us, this is a kind of throwback match. In a sense, also to the, not in the Netherlands sense, the heyday, although the 1990s were very good for them when they had that team with the De Boer brothers, Overmars, Bergkamp, Kluivert. But certainly in the Ukraine's case, the Shevchenko era was probably the best period of football for them. But they have seen a sort of resurgence in recent years in developing young players. You've obviously, for people following the Premier League, be very, very familiar with Zinchenko playing at Manchester City. They have a host of other players playing. They've got Yarmolenko at West Ham. They've got players dotted around some of Europe's biggest clubs. Again, their issue might be goals. And when you look at their squad, that is really where I think they have the biggest question marks. So that, I think, is where they will... But when they play against Austria, it's going to be interesting, I think, because you can expect the Ukraine to be adventurous, but maybe not actually have a finished product, whereas you can expect Austria to have none of the adventure, but maybe be solid enough to sort of take the one or two opportunities they might get, and that will be good enough. And then we can turn our attentions to the Netherlands, who are the standout team within this group. Obviously, this is a bit of very impressive recovery from them over the last 2 years after the worst period in the history of Dutch football, when obviously they missed out on qualifications for the last World Cup. The team was sort of in disarray. Didn't really look like it had a lot of talent in it. It still doesn't look like the most talented side you've ever seen. There's a lot of players who are at big clubs, but maybe not playing as significant of a role as you might want them to. And there are a couple of players who have made moves to big clubs and then not taken that step to the next level. So when you're looking at Van de Beek at Manchester United, or even De Ligt at Juventus, who's kind of been in and out of the side, a lot of players who haven't quite fulfilled their potential. I think they'll be pretty reliant on Memphis up front to be that spark and to be the one who creates goals. They're the only team in this group who really have some attacking players who can really deliver. But I expect them to win this group with ease, more so. I think the Netherlands probably fall into the category of the luckiest team in the group stages, because I think if you had put the Netherlands, for example, into the group of death, I think they would have really, really been in trouble. Whereas now they've been almost gifted a path into the next round. And given the fact that they failed to qualify for the last World Cup, just making it then to the knockout stages seems like significant progress for them.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because when you look at the betting, Ukraine are just above Austria, basically, in terms of qualification or snagging that second place. I think that's fair. I think Ukraine are just slightly better. I think it will come down to that final game. And you're absolutely right about the Netherlands have got themselves one hell of a hand here because they're playing most of their games in Amsterdam as well. So they've got all the home game advantage. They've got arguably the easier set of nations. Now, the thing with the Euros, right, is across all of them, there's not truly an easy game. There's never going to be like the qualifying where there's the San Marinos, Andorras, Liechtensteins. You're
doing that thing I hate, Sam. Game. You're doing that thing I hate. When you turn singular items into plurals, the San Marinos, the Andorras.
Okay, I apologize. They're not going to be playing San Marino, Andorra, Liechtenstein, people like that, countries like that, nations like that, principalities like that.
Now you're getting racist. People like that. Those people in San Marino, hey?
How about them? But yeah, I think the Netherlands got arguably the easiest hand dealt here with the home advantage as well. So.
Yeah, I guess my question was going to be, I agree. I think you're right. The Netherlands got a good draw here. How far do you think they can actually go getting out of this group stage? Because you have Van Dijk is out, right? And then Van de Beek is out as well. So two big players for them are out on injuries. Those are tough losses for them.
Yeah, it's the thing with the Netherlands, and this isn't the first time that this has happened. I mean, they had a mini golden generation come through. I remember when they won I think it was the under-17s World Cup, maybe around 2006, and there was that whole group of players who people thought were going to go on to be superstars. There is a lot of talented youth within this team. And there's a possibility that this tournament might serve as their kind of breakout moment. And that some of these players who are performing well at Ajax or at PSV, who, if you're not following the Eredivisie, you're not super familiar with, might now suddenly become some of the hottest property in Europe. And there's a lot of players when you look through who are highly, highly rated youngsters. It will be interesting to see how they do. But I'm not super confident in a squad that is so reliant on hoping that several players take a step forward. And I think that's the moment. This might be one tournament too soon.
The interesting.
I mean, they did well in the UEFA Nations League, right? Didn't they lose to Portugal in the final?
Yes.
The inaugural one, they beat England, didn't they, in the kind of semi-final of the mini tournament? But the other thing for them as well is that if they win Group C, which we all expect them to, they actually get the easier hand in the round of 16 after as well, because they'll be one of the teams that plays one of the third place teams from D. I think it's D, E, or F from what I see. So you're looking at England's group, potentially that group of death. They may get like a Portugal or a France or Germany in there. So that would be unfortunate for them. But as far as like playing a third team, I think that is a lucky side of the draw as well. So they've kind of got a lucky route out, as long as they don't hit one of the third places from Group F.
Yeah. But I guess that just about wraps up our preview for Group C. So hopefully YouTube will do that thing and prompt you now to watch Group D. Also, just make sure to like and subscribe to the video so you get all of our future content. And if you haven't subscribed to the podcast, do so now, because most of our content doesn't actually make it to YouTube.
We'll see you later.